I'm Ed Parcaut, your host of Inner Edison. What I'd like you to take away from today's show is our greatest accomplishments come from our greatest defeats. Today's guest is David Rosell. Let's welcome him and get to know his journey, his story, who he is, everything about him. How you doing, David?
I'm doing great, Ed. Thanks for having me on your show today.
I appreciate it. I'm glad that they introduced us to have you on. Before we get into a bunch of the stuff, I always want to talk about, I know you have a podcast called Recession-Proof Your Retirement. You want to give a little background on that?
Yeah, sure. I only started the podcast about 2 years ago, and I've done a lot of public speaking around the country over the years. And a great way to get your message out to wonderful audiences is through podcasts these days. And so I've been failing my way to success with it, and it's starting to get some great traction and been having fun with it, which is also very important, as you know.
Do you release once a week or once? Do you do an episode a week, or how do you do it?
Yeah, we used to do one a week, and then with scheduling and everything going on, it wasn't fun. And fun is a really important thing to put into all the work that we do. Mm-hmm. And so we're just doing one a month right now, and it's been working out great for us.
Good. Just so people know, and are you on all podcast areas, every app?
Yeah, all podcast media sources.
All right. And the reason I kind of want to start there first, because I know that a lot of people they're into podcasting. They want to listen to people after they listen to it. And we might get in a conversation and I might miss it. So I wanted to make sure it was put out first. You know what I mean? Just not enough time to talk about it. Yeah. And I know you've written books or certain things. What is, David, did you always want to be in the market, what you do now? Was that your goal as a kid? You're going to go to college and then do retirement stuff, or what was your plan?
Yeah, no, it was never the plan from the start. I've only had 2 jobs my entire life, and I've been the boss on both of those jobs. If I go back to when I was 15, I started a driveway seal coating company. I helped my dad seal coat his driveway with those 5-gallon drums of the rubberized sealer you pour out and apply with the squeegee. And the neighbors saw me and asked me if I would do their driveway. And I ended up making $25 for that driveway. And before the summer was out, word of mouth got around, and I seal coated 8 driveways. And the next summer, my brother helped me. He was 13 at the time, and we ended up doing 25 driveways. If you would have told me at that time that I would be growing this business for 15 years and do it through college, and then 10 years after college, I would have said, you got to be crazy. And that's really what happened. And at about 19, I was making some really good money for a young guy going to college. And I said, what am I going to do with this extra cash? I'm living at home. My expenses aren't high. The business is paying for my car. And that's when I learned about IRAs and just started to read books about this stuff and putting money into that. And by the time I sold that business at age 30, we were doing 1,200 driveways a summer. And on the winter months, we had to shut down operations because of Mother Nature. And I would always travel the world during that time with my backpack. And so 10 years later, I'd spent a month in 65 countries around the world.
Wow.
And I said, what is my next calling? What do I want to do next? And by that point, my staff would come to me with financial questions, family and friends. And I said, I think this is my next calling. And so went down the path of financial planning, and now we just finished our 20th year doing that.
Wow. I hope you were making more than $25 a driveway once you got 30 you're doing that a few years later.
As the quality improved, our prices went up at about the same ratio.
That's good. That's good, because a lot of driveways, for $25. But as a kid, your first job, you're like, well, I made $25, right?
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I was doing a number of the neighbors' lawns, mowing lawns with a push lawnmower. The self-propelled lawnmower had just come out. I was so excited. And I was making $5 a lawn. So I was like, wow, this is equal to 5 lawns. So I guess we could tie that into a discussion on inflation.
Yeah, definitely inflation's up today, 40-year high. I called this way, way, way back. I said, we're going into the 70s. I don't care what they say.
Yeah. Well, you being, a mortgage guru in your life, I mean, you remember when, mortgages when we were much younger, but back in 1979, 1980, I mean, do you remember what mortgage rates were back then?
21% was in 1987, actually.
Yeah, and now we complain if it goes from 2.85 to 3.2%. I mean,
Right.
these are unprecedented times, and the cost of borrowing money has just been at all-time lows.
Yeah. I tell people that the problem is when I got into the business, I was taking people from 13 to 9 and they loved me. Now, if I give somebody a 3%, this is like, I've been saying this story for the last few years. If I give somebody a 2.99, they think I'm taking advantage of them. Right.
Exactly.
And that we just got spoiled with such low rates. And I explained to people, and this is not about Mike, but you brought it up. The issue is that right now we're so spoiled with rates. Pre-pandemic, we were here where we are today, right? With interest rates, we were 3.25 to 3.5. Pandemic came, we went below that in the low twos, really low twos, and then now we're back to where we were pre-pandemic. You can't keep rates so low and grow. Our economies only grew because of all the stimulus programs and everything else they did. So we need to have rates go up to make our, to help out with this.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of young people who, let's say they graduated from college 4 or 5 years ago, and they're new to investing into the markets and they're investing into their 401ks. In their world, getting 15, 19, 25% annualized rates of return in their 401k is just the norm. Right. And you and I know that, the stock market averages, just if you were just in the S&P, under 10% per year, and no one wants to own just that asset class. And so if you're getting a 7 or 8% rate of return over time, you're doing pretty darn good.
Right. It's just like, and we were used to 4 to 5% appreciation in the real estate market. Now you have, in some markets, 26, 30% in a year. That just is not sustainable. It just gets to a point where people can't afford, after about 5 years now, that house is up 150%. Who can, a lot of people can't afford that anymore. And that's what we're running into in California. So.
Absolutely. And we had growth rates of 35, 36% in real estate right here in Bend, Oregon, where I'm from. So, you're down in California. I like to say up here that California keeps Oregon green with everyone moving up here.
Right. And with, and a lot, we'll just keep talking this and we'll talk more about you, because this is all important, because people need to understand that we're going to get to a point where we're going to get back to a normal appreciation. It's probably going to take us 10 years to do it, or 5 or whatever. Nobody knows. We've never been here before, right? In this type of a market. We've been through a pandemic before back in the, the 20s, but we've never been where we are right now with everything that's going on. So nobody really knows what's going forward. So what you have to do is, and that's what you're here for, is to talk about, you want to diversify in many different things and make sure you are investing your money properly and have the right person to do that. And so you want to kind of get into that?
Yeah, sure.
That's where you want to go. It's
a great direction. A great direction. I was going to say just before that is, most people think the world is linear, and it's not. So like if we're back at 2008 and real estate has dropped 50%, in the stock market over 50%, we kind of just think that's just the way it's always going to be. And of course, we're up 500% since then. If the markets are growing like they have been, just experiencing exponential growth rates, a lot of people think that's just the new norm. That's the way it's going to be. And of course, that's not the way it is. The world is not linear. But regarding diversification, it's such a great point. There's the modern portfolio theory won a Nobel Prize in economics. And what it says is that 90% of success in investing doesn't come from timing the market or owning that Tesla stock. It comes from having your eggs in many different baskets. And there's 24 major asset classes, real estate being a very important one of those 24. And it comes from owning all these 24 different buckets at different percentages based on your age and risk tolerance and time horizons, and then rebalancing over time, which, as you know, Ed, is when you have a certain asset class like real estate and it grows by 35%, you're now overweighted in that. So you sell the portion that you're overweighted at a premium, and you actually do what's counterintuitive and use those profits to buy what has lost on paper in the last year, because you want it in business, as you know, want to buy low and sell high. And so it's almost like pressing that button several times a year, and it goes boop, 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 and you're buying low, selling high. And this is one of a number of ways in my opinion, to succeed in investing over time.
Yeah. I think as you were talking about back in 2006, when we had the downturn, everybody thinks we're going to have another major one. And I mean, everybody, young people, they keep saying, I'm waiting to buy because I'm waiting for the next downturn. Well, the problem is that downturn was caused because we overbuilt during that period of time. We had these programs that allowed people to buy 2 and 3 homes. And when I say we overbuilt, I don't know if you know this, but if you go back, so the average age of someone coming to buy their first home, start their family, is 31 years old. That's the average age. Some people do it earlier, some people do it later. But if you go back from 2002 back 31 years, it was Roe versus Wade came in, and that abortion bill plummeted birth rates for the next 10 years. So you fast forward 31 years to 2002 to 2006, we're building all these houses, and we're building houses more than we've ever built in history, because they think we need them because they keep flying off the shelves, right? Because people are buying 2 and 3 of them with these loan programs, and then the whole bottom fell out. And that's why we had such a huge amount of houses and why it went down so much. Right. And then you had to absorb these houses over the next 5 or 6 years. So we didn't build anything. And if you look at what we built from 2010 to 2019, it was the same amount of homes as we built from 1930 to 1939, least in history. Now, if you fast forward to today, 31 years back, we're in a third year of a population expansion, birth rate expansion. And so I'll add that on top of everything else. What I'm getting at is, in the stock market, anywhere, people think there's always bubbles. There can be, and there is some ups and downs. Like we had pullback this week, 10% correction in the tech or whatever it is. You're going to have those things go up, come down, and then go past that. And you know, I just don't know when we're going to see this pullback that everybody thinks we're going to see in the housing market, because it's all about demand. We don't have enough supply.
Yeah, no, I agree. You know, when it comes to the stock market, I find that so many people like to time the market because money is very emotional. It's very emotional when we're earning it and making great rates of returns. And it's multiples of that, twice as much emotional when we're losing it, even if it's just a paper loss. And what I find is that people get in and out of the markets at exactly the wrong time. If the markets temporarily take a 10% setback, fear kicks in and they can say, I'm going to get out of that, only to buy it back when it starts to come back. Yeah. And it's interesting enough, if you look at the real estate market, which is a very important market, and if you look at the stock market, there's never been a down market in either one of those areas that hasn't rebounded, hit an all-time high. So it's important to do the best we can to remove as much emotion from the investing that we do in our lives.
I mean, you can go back to the greats, the 1929, 1987, Monday, right, when people were jumping out of buildings. And you go back, they still went further higher later. You just had to get through it, right? So
yeah, Black Monday, 1987, the biggest one-day stock market crash in history, that people were literally Wall Street traders jumping out of buildings to commit suicide. If only someone would have said, wait, by the end of the year, which is only just over 2 months away, the markets are going to rebound and hit an all-time high. Maybe they wouldn't have leaped off those buildings.
And it has to do with, you have to be okay with, it's only a loss when unless you margin. And I think one of the biggest problems is when people margin what they have. And then if they have a huge loss, you have to sell something, right? So maybe you just don't margin.
I agree. And then we could also look at human nature and say, if you are your money and then you lose your money, by definition, you aren't. So it's really important to put our net worth and our income into perspective, because we never want to be our money.
Correct. But people, it's focused on if you're going to retire. I remember the numbers where they said if you put so much in from 21 to 30, right, or 31, whatever that is, and you never put any more money in the same retirement account, and someone starts at 30, they'll never catch you, right, because the compounding and certain things they're talking about, the growth. It's important to start early, very early. We pushed our son. I wish somebody would have done it for me, but they didn't. But I'm doing it for, our son's he's in the Army. I almost said Navy because I was Navy. He's in the Army, and it's like, start putting your money away in that 401k that they allow you to do, right? Just put that away so that you can build your personal wealth going forward. So.
Yeah, it's such an important point that you bring up that I've shared this story in both of my books. And it's a story about when I was 19, going back again. And when you're 19 and you're a male, you have two things really on your mind, and cars are one of those. And so I don't know if you remember the old Honda Prelude, but I remember the bank was going to loan me the money for this car with my small down payment. And I'll never forget sharing this story in the brochures with my father and my grandma. And they showed me this chart that's in the book that showed if you started funding at 19, $2,000 a year into an IRA, an individual retirement account, which at that time was the maximum you could contribute, and stopped funding when you were 27. So you're funding it for only 8 years, putting $16,000 in, never add another contribution to it. And it grows at the stock market S&P average at the time of 10% per year. You'd have over $1 million by the time you were 65. The chart shows on the other side that if you start when you're 28, when the other person was already ended, and funded it all the years that the other person didn't until you're 65, you have funded it at $78,000 and you still have $20,000 or 20% less money. And this was a magical day for me because what I learned is that you don't need to do anything extraordinary if your goal is to accumulate wealth. You really just need to do some ordinary things like fund a 10% of your paycheck, but do that extraordinarily well. Do it at every single pay period and start now.
That is correct. So, yeah. But people don't.
You're agreeing with me.
Yeah, I can't. That's true. That's so true. I mean, it's like I'm not going to argue with the truth. And the problem is people don't. People wait too long. And the same thing goes to for the reason I push building personal wealth through home ownership is most people don't even have a 401k, a 403b, or IRA. But I can get them into a house and let that appreciate, and then they can build wealth through their real estate if they're not going to do anything else. But I don't know if you know this, but in California, they have a mandate that you have to get the California plan. If you have so many employees and you don't offer a 401k, they have to take the California plan, which is an IRA, really bad IRA. But the problem is most people don't understand it's an IRA. So they go ahead and get another IRA. Now they got two IRAs and they're overfunding.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And then when it comes to IRAs, the bad news is you can't access the money till you're 59 and a half. And the great news is you can't access it until you're 59 and a half.
Yeah, whatever goes in there is going to stay in there. You can't borrow against it or do anything. Just leave it in there, right?
But it's going to grow tax deferred as well.
Correct.
And of course, the 401k works almost exactly like an IRA, but you can take loans out of it. And that interest that you're paying on it, you're really paying back to yourself. But hopefully, for the most part, if anyone's funding money into their qualified retirement accounts, they're not accessing it until they really need it at the distribution phase of their life.
Right. Now, is there other things that people should do besides those?
Oh, where to begin?
I mean, we talk about 401ks. 403b is if it's a nonprofit company. 401ks is for-profit company. And the other thing about that is each 401k can be totally different in each employer, meaning that you can borrow or you can't borrow, or you can take out or you can't take out. It's however they're set up, from what I understand. Right.
Great point. I would say there's a certain percentage of the population, maybe 5%, like myself, when I was reading all the books I could on investing, that love this stuff. They're knowledgeable, they get it. And I think it's great that they're doing it by themselves. But failure is not an option when it comes to this investing stuff. And I think it's one of the most important relationships you can have in your life. It might be the most important professional relationship besides a doctor if you're ill, is interviewing a bunch of qualified retirement specialists in your area and building that financial team, just like one does with their mortgage professional or their attorney or their real estate agent, and having someone that really is there to hold their hand, educate them, and help them get to the top of their financial mountain so that one day they're independent of the paycheck. And I really think it goes back to that old adage, if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail.
Right. And I agree with that too. But my question would be, how do they find somebody who will oversee their stuff, because a lot of investors, they want a certain dollar amount, right? You need to have $100,000 in assets or whatever that number is. How do they find other people that maybe can give them the knowledge, but don't have those limits?
Yeah, that's tough. You really want to find someone who's more in the people business than even the numbers business, and you better know your numbers. But probably the best way is word of mouth. Start asking your friends. Do you work with a financial advisor? Do you like this person? Do you trust them? You can get on to the national sites and see their track record and their ethics, if there's been any violations. Most financial planners are caring people that put their clients first. But like in any profession, not everyone is ethical.
Right.
But they went to school for this. They know their stuff. And if you find someone that you're comfortable and you've interviewed them and they have good references, it's an important relationship in their lives.
Now, for me, I have to be licensed in every state that I want to do business in as a loan person. Do you have to be licensed in every state as a financial planner?
We do. And to be licensed in another state is basically paying an annual fee. There's not much to it, a little bit of paperwork. So if we get a referral from someone like we recently did in North Carolina, and they were a large enough client, well, now all of a sudden we're licensed in North Carolina. And of course, today with Zoom and FedEx, it's pretty easy to do business nationwide.
No, I just wondering, because for us, it's a lot more than just paperwork. We have to, it's I don't know why they should make it across. We're a national mortgage licensing through that system. Why don't they just make it the same license across the United States? But each state wants their money.
Exactly. It all comes down to the dollar.
Yeah.
Yep, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
A lot of bureaucracy.
Yeah,
unfortunately. I know you love bureaucracy.
Oh, I love it, as you can tell with the flag behind me. I was in the Navy. I had to get out after 5 years, 5 months, and 14 days, but who was counting? Because of the fact of just that, what we're talking about. And the worst thing that, I think it was it Reagan said that, the worst thing you can hear is somebody from the government with their hand out who says, "I'm here to help," right? The worst. Yeah. So, and that's basically what you run into. And when they're trying to help, sometimes government does try to help, but when they do, they overreach and they hurt. And that's what they've done in our industry a few times. And I'm sure they've done it in your industry. But one thing that I didn't realize years ago, and this is probably 15 years ago, a financial planner didn't have to have a degree back then. Right now they do.
Yeah. Now we have to speak well English good.
No, but I'm just mean that somebody could graduate high school, could go take the test, after they studied and be a financial planner. But what do they know? And I'm not saying they, the same thing was in our industry. Nobody has a master's degree like I do, but that's different. I love money, the way that help people build personal wealth through many different avenues. And for us, same thing you were talking about. I refer them to a financial planner, a trust attorney, all that stuff once they're buying their house, because what happens when you buy that house and then it starts building equity and then somebody passes away? You want to go through probate? You don't want to do that. And so let's get them set up properly so you don't have that problem as you grow. It's easier now than later, trying to fix it.
Yeah. And as a top-notch mortgage professional that you are, you're in a unique position, because to help them get into a mortgage, you have to know everything about their finances. You have to know everything about their income, their net worth, their investments. So you're in this position where you're looking at this picture, and if it doesn't all add up, or you can see there's an area of weakness in their future planning, you're able to guide them and say, you might want to speak to a financial planner or speak to this banker about this, or I notice you don't have a will and trust. So you're able to give a lot of value added to these people.
Yeah. And there's a lot of times where I'm like, okay, we need to talk to your financial advisor before we do anything. They look at me and I'm like, yeah, this might cause you a tax implication that I don't know about. Please tell them what you're doing and make sure they say it's okay, or she, whoever they are. And because you don't want to make that mistake. I mean, I deal with one of the largest debts in someone's life. You deal with one of the largest investments in their life. I look at it differently. It's like, I don't want to put you in a position where you're going to have a taxable event because of something we did.
Absolutely. And you're right. By the time someone hits retirement, because all of our clients are people that are in the distribution phase of their life, they're getting their income, their paychecks and playchecks from us, in addition to Social Security. by the time they get to this stage of their life, generally their retirement accounts is their number one asset, even above the value of their home, if they're going to have a comfortable retirement.
Hopefully it's that way.
Hopefully so. You brought up a good point about financial planners needing a degree. Years ago, a decade, 2 decades ago, everyone called themselves a financial planner, but I think a lot of these financial planners were either truly mutual fund salesmen, life insurance salesmen, bankers, and there's still a little bit of that today. However, I think it's really important when we're talking about your listeners finding a financial planner is to find someone who truly gets compensated for putting true blue financial plans together for them, where that plan in having a plan put together like an architectural blueprint is not related to helping them get into investments. Where you're paying for the advice, almost like you pay an architect to design your home. And then once you've nailed down that blueprint the way that you want, you can then find the general contractor or top-notch builder that you want to build that plan and make that a reality. So I think it's really important to be with someone that's their sole purpose isn't to offer financial products, but to really focus on the plan. And then if the client invites them to, they can at a later date help them with their insurance needs, investment needs, and so on.
Yeah, I think your industry's changed a lot compared to my industry also, where we're not charging a client like we used to, right? We all get paid from when we sell it off. You guys don't make commission like you used to. Or I don't know if you all don't, but that's how they used to make their money, is when they would have you trade stocks, right? A lot of people that's how they made their money. Where now you as financial planners, you're looking at, if I grow your account, this is how we make it. Is that the case?
Yeah. There's still a lot of financial planners that make their income based on commissions. I don't think that's a good idea for the client or even the planner. I believe that compensation breeds behavior, and that's in any industry. So I think it's important to work with a financial planner that charges you for a plan. Really top-notch financial planners will guarantee that, which means if they haven't met or surpassed the expectations, they'll refund the planning fee. That's how confident they are that it's going to make a positive difference in their life. And then if that planner or another planning group helps them with the investing, when you're getting compensated based on commissions, it kind of just teaches them to be trading all the time. And that's not good. So the top planning firms that I see out there these days are charging a small percentage for the assets that they care for, or just charging a flat fee, and that entails the management of all of their assets. And it's really important for compensation and one's value to be aligned.
Okay. All right. So we went over a few different things today, right? We didn't talk about your book, did we? No.
Okay. We have not yet. Yeah.
So when we talk about your books that you've written, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah. So my first book is called Failure's Not an Option: Creating Certainty in the Uncertainty of Retirement. This is what the cover looks like. This is Mount Bachelor right here in Bend, Oregon. And it's focused on, this one is for people in the distribution phase that have created wealth already. A lot of people think, oh, they've got millions in their account, they're set for life. But a lot of these successful people know exactly how much money they have, but they have no idea of what their money can or can't do for them for the rest of their life. How much should I be living on? Should I be taking income from the Roths this year, the traditional IRAs, the brokerage accounts? We've got our real estate investments coming in as well, and it's very overwhelming for them. But what I realized is that financial planning books are not the type of books that most people want to read in the evening or on the weekends. And I set out a goal, which I'm told I achieved, was to write financial planning books that were not only informative, but fun to read. So how I accomplished this is I start off each chapter with one of my more riveting travel stories in my youth when I traveled overseas. One example might be climbing in the Himalayas, or actually serendipitously being in Berlin on November 13th, 1989, when the Berlin Wall came down. and take that story and then somehow segue into a financial lesson. And when there's one too many graphs, it then goes into the next chapter and starts with a fresh travel story into a new financial lesson. The book, I'd never written a book before, but it went on to get a lot of national acclaim and got endorsed by Charles Schwab and some icons in the world of business and sports and motivation. And then a lot of people said to me, hey, this book is so informative and fun, but we need a book that does the same for our children or grandchildren. And that's when I came out with Keep Climbing, a Millennial's Guide to Financial Planning.
And I think you said something before the show about the climb. You're talking about the climb. That's not the climb to the top that's dangerous. It's the way back down, right?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. A fun, quick story, and this kind of gives you an idea of how I do this with the book, is there's a gentleman who I've met a number of times named Ed Viesturs. And Ed is the #1 mountaineer that's ever walked the planet Earth. This guy summited Mount Everest 7 times without supplemental oxygen. I mean, you'd think it's not possible. And I'll never forget the day that someone asked him, like, when you leave base camp, most people think the goal is to get to the top. And Ed said, that's never my goal. He said 80% of the accidents and 80% of the deaths actually happen on the descent because you're facing lack of sunlight, you're hungry, you got fatigue, and all these different things. He says, our goal is to summit, but get back down alive to our friends and family. And he went on to say it's the second half of his journey that takes the most amount of risk and needs the most amount of planning. And that was my aha moment for the premise of this book, because I realized that when our clients are reaching the top of their financial mountain, and now it's the last day that they're adding funds to their IRAs or their 401ks or 403bs, and now they're going to be living off these funds for the next 2, 3, and sometimes even 4 decades. That it's the second half of their financial journey that also takes on the most amount of risk and needs the most amount of planning. So we put plans together where we're holding their hands to get down the financial mountain, which in other words is saying to the end of their lives, living the life they've imagined, but making sure that they're never outliving their income.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because most people, you don't want to have to go back to work because you used up all your money, right?
Sad but true. I don't frequent the place, but when I go to Walmart and a very smiley senior citizen hands me my cart, I always ask myself, are they there because they're bored and they want to see people? And I'm sure some of them are there for that reason, or are they there because they have to be there? They're dependent on that minimum wage income to just live in addition to their Social Security. I'm sure it's a little bit of both.
Right. I do know some people who will never retire, even though they could, because they don't know what they would do. And then there's some people who retire real early and they enjoy the rest of their life because they did well. So I think it just depends on the people.
Yeah. And in Failure is Not an Option, I talk about most people don't even know where the word retirement came from. So would you like to know?
Sure. You brought it up.
Yeah, why not? So it comes from the Latin word retire, which means to end or be put out of use, because our great-grandparents would work their entire lives with one company in general, get their gold watch, and 3.5 to 4 years later, they were gone. They were no longer with us. And their social insecurity, which I like to refer to it as, was there to help support them and supplement them for that 4 years that they were going to spend in retirement. You and I know that most people don't want to end or be put out of use. So I like to use the term financial independence, because there's a lot of people that you and I know who would shrivel up if they had no purpose or work, even in their 70s or even 80s sometimes, and that they're independent of the paycheck, but they go to work not for that paycheck. They go to work because they want to have other purpose in their lives. So I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, I see that all the time. And because I always ask people way older than me, why are they still working? And they're like, because what else am I going to do? Right. Because one guy, he's like, if I go home, if I retire, I'll drive my wife crazy. So.
Well, let's face it. The wives out there didn't sign up for their husbands 24/7 in the house, right?
Yeah. Well, she retired a couple of years ago, and
Okay.
so she rides bikes all the time. And then she's like, yeah, and then she want to be home with me instead of riding bikes, which she really enjoys. So, whatever makes you happy, as long as you plan for your future, that's what we're talking about today. Make sure you plan for it. And if you made a mistake in life and stuff happens, because the Great Recession hurt a lot of people's 401ks, 403bs. They cash them out sometimes to live off of, and they use them up. And so a lot of people going forward are starting over, and that's a horrible thing, but that's just how life is sometimes.
Yeah. This reminds me of a story from several years ago. One of my main mentors in life is a gentleman named Dan Sullivan. Mm-hmm. And Dan celebrated his 75th birthday recently. And I was at a gathering where Dan was, and Dan writes 4 books a year, believe it or not, 4 books. And a woman, Nancy, came up to him and said, Dan, when are you going to retire? And I'll never forget when he said, Nancy, I retired years ago. And she said, what? You still speak all over the country. You're still writing 4 books a year. You're anything but retired. And he said, Nancy, I retired years ago from everything I no longer wanted to be doing. And now I spend 80% of my waking hours in my unique ability doing the things at work that I'd be doing even if I wasn't getting paid. And that day was a game changer for me, because people would always say in my world as a wealth manager, hey, Rosell, when are you going to retire? And early on, my true goal was to retire as young as possible, because you and I love to do all these activities and stay youthful. And ever since then, I have refocused my life where I've got a 20-year game plan. I'm in my mid-50s right now. I want to work well into my 70s, but I am now spending 80% of my hours at work in my own unique ability, really just focused on the things like what we're doing today that I would be doing even if I wasn't getting compensated. And I think that's going to keep me younger, because I see the people that still have purpose into their 70s and 80s are the ones that stay youthful and even more healthy.
And live longer. Look at Betty White. So
God bless her.
Yeah, just almost got to 100, and then you have George Burns, that was smoking the whole time, and he goes over 100.
Yogi.
Yeah.
Crazy.
So, but it is very important in life to figure out what you do well and only do that, period. Earlier the better. I figured that out years ago. I talk to people. That's my thing. I like talking to people, whether that is helping them get a loan, talking. I do not want to do any paperwork at all. That is not my deal. I don't want to do that. So I let other people do that. Just like our podcast. I don't want to edit them. I just want to talk on them. Let them do something else.
Exactly. Right? You were talking about that earlier. And then yet the people that edit your podcast and my podcast, their tails are wagging when they're doing it. They're loving what they're doing.
Yeah.
And that's important in any organization. My organization, we're all in our unique ability. We're all in a role. We got the right butts in the right seats, where every person is doing what they'd want to be doing. And Emma and Casey, their tails are wagging when they're doing paperwork. And you and I, if we had to do that for even one morning, we'd be perspiring and uncomfortable, and we'd eventually get depressed.
Well, I'm a sales guy, so I'm used to doing paperwork. I just don't like it. I want to do what I want to do, which is talk. So I totally agree, just a little bit.
Yeah.
As we grow, as you grow your business, there's things you have to do. Then you get to a point where you can do the things you only want to do. And that's the goal that you need to be at as you're growing your business, because you can't always throw all these people in there, because you don't usually have that amount of money. So I agree with you, but it takes time to get there. And it's usually, like you said, your age. I ain't saying mine. Basically about the same. That you finally realize that, and then you start going, I want to give back. And that's one of the reasons I do the radio show. I saw too many people who've lost their houses. Their parents lost the houses during 2006, that years, 2006 and that period. The kids grew up with their parents who had lost a house, and they were like, I don't want to own a house and see that stress. Well, that's wrong. It's the same thing with people who lost their 401k or whatever. Kids could say the same thing, that I saw my parents lose their money. I don't want to put my money in that. You can't look at things that way. You need to educate yourself, go forward and figure this stuff out for yourself. You need to build, you have to be in real estate. That's just my take.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And people will say, what's better, real estate or the stock market? And I'll say, yes, you have to be in both. There is no better. That each one has pros and cons. You look at real estate and you can control 100% of an asset with 5, 10, 20% down and partake in all of the equity increase. It's not as liquid. Everything has pros and cons. You could live in real estate. You can't live in your stock market portfolio. But you can get your paychecks and playchecks as well. So they're all, there's pros and cons, but the idea is that they're different asset classes. And like you said, you have to own both.
Yeah, it's about being diversified. That's why a lot of people say, well, where do I invest my money? And people say, just do the mortgage funds or whatever those things. And, whatever works for you. You can't always pick the right stock, but you can be in other things that have control of that. There's even in our industry, or I should say your industry too, but Delaware statutory trust that you can take money from a 1031 exchange, put in there, and that will grow the same way. And then you can take the money out there and put it back into real estate. So there's a lot of stuff you can do to better yourself. And we were just here to say, do it.
Absolutely. There's a athletic shoe company that once said that.
Just do it.
Just do it.
Yeah. Yeah. There's another one that says, don't quit. And it says, do it. Yeah. Don't quit. Do it. Anyway.
Man, I like that. Yeah. So,
yeah. I like it. Anyway.
You hear a lot of people these days, younger people that might say, I can't afford it. And David Bach, a well-known fellow author, came up with the concept of the Latte Factor. And I'll ask them, well, do you drink your coffee outside? Oh, yeah, I go to Starbucks. And were you there today? Yeah. And I said, what'd you get? Did you just get one of those drip coffee? Oh, no, I got a double latte, this and that. I'm like, okay. And I'm like, did you get any muffins or egg sandwiches? Oh, yeah, I got a blueberry muffin. And then you find out that they spend $8 and they do that 3 times a week. That's $25 a week. It's $100 a month, $1,200 a year. You'd start doing that from 19 onward, and you're going to have 7 figures saved up, potentially by the time you retire, just on that latte and the muffin. So it really comes down to the tougher we are on ourselves today, the easier life will be on us later.
Yeah, I had a guy just budget. You got to budget yourself. And if you want to buy a house, you can do it by budgeting and putting money away. But the same people who have that coffee in the morning and the muffin actually go out to Chipotle for lunch. And then they also go eat dinner out too, because they just don't want to eat at home. They want to spend it. So you're talking thousands of dollars that they could be putting away. So.
Thousands of dollars. And then the other extreme is not having any fun in life, never going out for a cocktail or for lunch.
10%.
Accumulating all this wealth and have never really lived a day in your life. And we don't want to die with our music inside of us. So life is about balance. Mm-hmm. You don't, as grandma and my dad said, you don't need to do anything extraordinary to get there. You just need to do some ordinary things, but do those ordinary things extraordinarily well.
And I think we should leave it right there, because that was a perfect ending with that statement.
I concur.
All right. David, thank you so much for joining us today on Inner Edison. And if the listeners, if you like what we're doing here, please just share, let us know. Let us know on YouTube that you like this. If you're watching it on there, just put a little hashtag replay that you've watched it. We really appreciate it and you're enjoying it. And again, David, thank you so much for being on here today.
Such a pleasure, Ed. Thanks for having me on your show.